to our lovely Managing Dental Drama teammates, team members. We have something in store for y'all that y'all have been asking for. And to me, docs, this is something that you could gift your team members. I'll quit talking. Bethany, roll it out.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited about this because the one pervasive question that I get on a weekly basis is somebody telling me about an uncomfortable conversation that they had with a patient regarding insurance and how they could not de-escalate the conversation. I get asked this weekly. So doctors, if you didn't know that your teams are struggling through these conversations, they are. So this bonus episode is actually detailing out specific strategies for handling those very uncomfortable conversations.
Which, you're right, as a doc, I mean, I'm sure it's happening some, but I don't go up there, I don't want to go up there, and I don't want to know about it. So I bury my head in the sand, and my poor team has to fend for themselves. And so I'm super excited to have some tools for them. So wait, tell me again, how do I get this?
So you've got to be a subscriber. And December, we are dropping this bonus episode. So you need to subscribe by December 2nd so you can have access to this content.
Awesome.
Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Happy Thanksgiving week, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. We've had such great content this month on the whole aspect of generosity and appreciation. I wanted to wrap up the month, especially this week, with it being Thanksgiving week, with some really sweet examples of generosity. One of the questions that Dr. Kuba will often ask me after I've had a guest on, like Dr. Williamson last week, is she'll ask me for more examples. Can you provide more examples of what he said when he meant XYZ? And so I thought it would be a really good summary today to focus on some acts of generosity that I have personally witnessed over these 15 years of consulting that I think are really special. And some of them are big and bold, and some of them are just sweet and simple. But each of these come out of a heart of appreciation. And that appreciation led my clients in these moments to make choices to be generous. And so I think it's a good encouragement for us to listen to examples of the ways that somebody else has been generous and to allow the messaging of that to really hit us right there in the heart. And we're asking ourselves, would we do that? We may even let logic take over and go, oh my gosh, I would never do that because of XYZ. Somebody might take advantage of it. Somebody might ask me for more. And we can think of a lot of reasons to not be generous. But I hope you'll take the examples that I give today and you'll use it as an opportunity to consider where you might be generous in your life and with your team in particular. So I wanted to start with what I view as a real practical one, but it struck me as extremely generous in the moment. So I've got a client that has 2 RDAs, and there was a period of time where one RDA left the practice and it was just down to the one RDA. And so that RDA certainly had her hands full. She was managing a entire column of treatment plus the side column that the other assistant used to manage. And so she was putting in a lot of extra work. The day was much more stressful. And my client chose a very generous act in this moment. Now, I think anybody that works any type of job, but especially an hourly job, knows that there's going to be times that are busier and more hectic, and there's going to be times that are slower and less hectic. And that's just par for the course. But what my client did is she said, you know what? I see you, and I know that you're working more than you would have to work if there was a counterpart. So until I get a second RDA hired, I'm going to pay you $100 extra a day for any day that you work alone. And that's just my way of showing appreciation to you. I don't want you to be bitter or upset that you're having to work so much harder. And I want you to also know that I appreciate you for all the extra effort that you're putting in. So this to me was an extremely generous act because number one, it came out of a heart of appreciation. Number two, it took a situation that could turn somebody sour, that RDA that was left to fend for herself. Over time, as this doc is looking for a replacement, that assistant can start to grow weary and bitter and tired about how hard she's having to work. But my client prevented that from happening by making sure that this RDA knew that she was seen and appreciated, and that my client was willing to put money into that. Many practice owners might be willing to just go, oh, good, well, I know it's going to be hard, but at least I might have a month or two of reduced overhead. But my client didn't think of it that way. She said, let's take what I would have paid that other person and let's give it to this RDA. So I think it's such a bold and awesome act of generosity. The second example I wanted to tell you about was one that you might think of when you hear of the word generosity. I had a client that had a very valuable team member that had been extremely loyal to his practice over the years and was quite phenomenal in her position. She did a fantastic job. And he knew that she was having some financial hardships. Her husband had been in and out of work, and he knew that times were hard for them. And so he was very concerned when he heard that her car broke down and that she was really struggling to scrounge up the money to fix the car. So he decided to put his own money towards those repairs. It was not cheap. It was not an inexpensive fix to her car, but he knew that, number one, he appreciated her. He knew she had a substantial impact on the practice. He knew that she was a hard worker and really was just up against hard times. And he took the opportunity to really bless her with a financial gift that allowed her to get her car repaired. Again, this is the one that people think about and they're like, oh, but then they're going to keep coming back for more. Then they're going to ask you to do this for them and do that for them. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For this particular client of mine and his employee, she did not ask for anything further. There was a long history there, and she was just very appreciative of his help. The third example is in the state of Texas. We don't have any kind of state-sponsored maternity leave. And so oftentimes women who work in dental practices, they're usually taking a quick 6 to 8 week maternity leave, if that, and then they're back to work in many situations. And so I had one client that had a employee who very surprisingly got pregnant. She and her husband weren't quite prepared yet, but they were excited about the baby, and he knew that there was going to be financial hardship if she lost all of her pay. She didn't have a lot of PTO stored up, and so he knew that she was going to go several weeks, if not a couple of months, without pay. So he and I dialogued back and forth, and I'll be honest, my non-generous self really tried to persuade him not to take the actions that he ultimately took, but he ended up continuing to pay her throughout the maternity leave, which did end up being about 8 or 9 weeks long that he paid her for those couple of months. And that was without any strings attached. So it wasn't an attempt to get her to come back. It wasn't anything other than him purely caring about this employee and not wanting her and her husband to be upon a financial hardship because she stopped getting paid. So he paid the maternity leave even though that was not a part of his policy or anything that he had done before. And to me, again, it's an act of generosity. Now, this might sound like an odd one, but I find that many of my clients, when they are terminating an employee for whatever reason that may be, ultimately they're fired. They're moving on. Go forth and conquer somewhere else, not in this office. And I find it to be an act of generosity, and I've had many clients choose to do this. They recognize that if they fire a team member and then that team member turns around and is going for at least 2, 3, 4 weeks without pay, that can be an undue burden on that team member. So I've had so many of my clients that are willing to do a severance pay. So they terminate the employee from her position, and then they let the employee know, I am going to pay you for an additional 2 weeks, or whatever the case may be. This will allow you to get your foot in the door, get resumes out, and hopefully you can secure a job quickly and you won't miss a beat when it comes to pay. Now, again, in a moment where an employer is terminating an employee, that is a very odd time to extend generosity. But I think it is such a powerful moment for somebody who's having a freak out. Oh my gosh, I'm being fired. And immediately their mind is going to go to, how can I pay the bills? How am I going to get food on the table? What am I going to do? And for that to be met with, by the way, you don't have to worry about pay for the next 2 weeks. You go, you start applying, you take your time. I'm going to pay you for 2 weeks. And that's such a relief in that moment. And to me, that is an act of generosity that is unnecessary, but very nice to have for that employee in the moment. I've got another client that she and her team had a busy couple of months. It was intense. It was go, go, go. There was just not a moment to rest. And so she recognized how hard her team was working. And after a couple of months of just really banging it out with dentistry and all the things related to running a successful business, she wanted to do something that was special and was a surprise for them, but also knowing that they were so tired from the last couple months, she also did not want to do something that took a lot of time away from them and their families. And so one afternoon, she told them to keep their schedule open. She just took them down to the shoe shop and allowed them all to pick out a brand new pair of tennis shoes and then sent them on their way to go home. So it was brief. It wasn't a drug out team building event. She recognized in the moment that her team was tired, but she wanted to do something special for them. And that was what she did. And it was certainly seen as an act of generosity. I also had a client who, again, had some phenomenal team members, and he knew that one single mom on his team had been working diligently to try to make enough money to pay for her 5th grade son to go to an away camp with his 5th grade school. So apparently they did a 5th grade away camp for three days and 2 nights, and there was a cost to it. I think it was a little under a couple $100. It wasn't expensive, but he knew that she was struggling to save enough to send her son to this camp, and that ultimately he really wanted to go and be with his friends for this 5th grade field trip camp. And so he paid for the camp. He gave the employee the money and said, I want this to go towards your son's camp. He added a little bit of extra to it so that the son would have money to buy, food and snacks and all of that. And that was such a powerful moment for this single mom that had been working so hard. And it was a relatively small financial investment for the doctor. I believe it was a couple $100. And it sent a strong message to this single mom. Hey, I see you and I care. And I don't want your son to miss out on something that he really wants. And so that was a really cool act of generosity. I had another one that he had experienced a lot of staff turnover. It was just back to back. Somebody was moving, and then he would replace that person with somebody new, and then a different person on the team was, quitting to go to school full time, and it was just mind-boggling how much transition he was experiencing in such a short period of time. And once he had a moment to really reflect, he was very much impacted by what he called his stable force. There was an employee that was just there through all of this. She was stable. Yes, she was tired, but she never let it show. She was always showing up to work with her best attitude, putting her best foot forward, and she was just rocking it. Despite the stressful circumstances, she was staying committed to patient care and to her boss, who was struggling through this staffing issue. And so fast forward, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks after kind of going through a lot of major transitions and finally bringing some new people on, he ended up just writing her a super sweet, heartfelt note that talked about how much he appreciated her loyalty, her commitment to show up even when she was tired. And he did put a financial gift in there. It was a pretty substantial gift of $500, I believe, and just said, you deserve this and more. I couldn't have survived these last couple of months without you. Thanks so much for being an amazing part of this team. So he just took the opportunity to notice somebody who was having a positive impact, and then he thanked her, and he thanked her in a very generous way. The last example that I'll give you is I was recently with a client who his team is definitely on the mends. They've kind of had a history of being negative and just struggling through the day, struggling through the schedule, struggling to make the practice profitable enough. And so we had a team meeting where we spent a lot of time talking about the power of positivity, and he and the team were just so engaged and doing such a good job of sticking with this content. And afterwards, I had recommended a book in the team meeting, and afterwards he asked me, he said, "What's the name of that book again? Who's the author?" And he was looking it up on his phone, and as we continued to chat, he was doing something on his phone, and then he kind of plopped the phone down and he said, "Well, I just ordered 15 copies of that book. I'm really hoping that it is helpful to them, not only in their professional lives, but also in their personal lives." So what's cool about that story is it's a relatively small book token. I think he's got 15 employees, and these books were probably $12 to $15 each. So relatively small investment, once again, and yet he took the opportunity without even thinking to just be generous. He says, "Hey, Bethany says this book's going to be helpful. I know my team needs help. I'm going to buy it right now and have these books available to the team members." And again, that is such a powerful act of generosity. Small. It's a small act of generosity, but it is a powerful example of generosity. So I hope you can kind of get a flair for how generosity can look so different. And yet, each of those acts of generosity that I just talked about are powerful. They have the ability to encourage and to inspire and to award somebody who deserves that recognition. And so I would encourage you today, it's Thanksgiving week, to think through your team and figure out who needs an act of generosity from me. Whether that's boss to employee, employee to employee, manager to employee, I don't care how the arrangement is. We can all have the opportunity to show generosity. And so I want you guys to think about that this week. What can you do to show generosity? And it can be small, it can be big, but no matter what, I want you to choose these acts of generosity so that your appreciation for your team, for your coworkers, that can be on full display. So have a great Thanksgiving week. Enjoy thinking about this content. I hope you walk away from this week with lots of ideas and opportunities to display your generosity.
Do you know what I am super excited about?
What?
You were mentioning the December digest.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The Managing Dental Drama digest. And I guess you said I wrote an article that you liked.
Loved it.
I don't even remember. I wrote it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't even remember what I babbled about. But I'm glad you liked it. But I am more excited about what you have to share. Like you mentioned, can I talk about this
Yes.
here? You mentioned that there's a lot of team building ideas, which at the end of the year, we need all of that. You mentioned goal setting, which usually is my moment. But the way I think you've kind of described to me how you're going to break it down and tips, like, I can't wait to get started. I can't believe I'm saying that. I can't wait to get started on goal setting. And then can I also mention the other?
Yeah.
You said December is going to be a bonus.
There's going to be 2 bonus episodes, which I'm so excited about.
Are you charging more for that?
No way. It's just December. It's the month of giving. So we're going to give 2 bonus episodes.
Speaking of charging, how? Like, when you look at the subscriber to get all of this, it's like less than $2 a day. Like, how are you staying in business giving away all of these tips for less than $2 a day?
Eventually it will pay off. So if we're looking at business right now, man, it looks dismal, but it will pay off in the long run. Because again, the more people can access this, the more people that become subscribers, it will make sense in the long run. You and I both knew it wasn't going to make a lot of sense initially, but thankfully we've got a good group of subscribers and it's going to pay off in the end.
I'm so excited.
I know, me too.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.